So, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are and at whatever time of day you're listening. I'm Rick Wootton with Tagit, and welcome to another edition of Tagit's Game Changer series. For those of you that this is your first time to join us, well, welcome. And for those of you who have listened in previously, well, really appreciate the support that you are showing us. So, if you're a new listener, our primary objective for this series is to really introduce you to practitioners, industry leaders, and I'm really thrilled about having Nelson today because he falls into several of these categories. But people who are really experienced in the digital space today. And while we could probably have a debate about whether Nelson is in the digital space, I think by the time we finish the podcast today, you'll figure out exactly how strong a contribution SaaScada and what they do is making to the digital world. But my hope is that you'll hear something that'll spark an idea or something that might help you along your digital journey or what you're doing in your bank. I mean, the truth is we live in a very fast-paced environment, and frankly, without being able to interact with people like Nelson and other guests that we've had, it can be a bit lonesome at times trying to find information. So anyway, at Tagit, this is part of what we try to do to help our customers along. And again, really appreciate you joining us. So today, I'm joined by Mr. Nelson Wootton, who is the co-founder and CEO of SaaScada. And you're probably asking, who in the world is SaaScada? So you're about to find out. So interestingly enough, Nelson's been around for a while, and he's held many senior technology and business roles over the last 20 years. He's a self-proclaimed cloud evangelist. I like using that term, Nelson. And he's worked in or around the cloud since 2006. And one of the things you'll discover about this gentleman as we speak with him today is his passion for technology will definitely show through. And he's used that passion and his experience to transform businesses during his career. And Nelson, I think you've probably built and sold a few businesses over your career. So it's really good to have you here. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Rick. Really great to be here. Yeah, I'm super happy to talk to you about SaaScada and what we're doing. It's probably worth touching on where the business comes from. My co-founder and I, we built a bank in the UK 11 years ago now. I hate saying that because it's I keep adding years onto it.
And you look so young.
Oh, stop it. I'm 52 tomorrow, so I'm definitely not so young. So yeah.
Well, we're not going to share ages because I'm going to come out looking really bad on this one. So.
Yeah, we built a bank in the UK, digital-only bank. Really fabulous project, really good fun, scaled, exited that. But in doing so, we had to buy core banking software. Many of your listeners will be deeply familiar and sigh and all the rest of it, all the frustrations that many people have with core banking software. And it was very difficult to acquire it. It was expensive. It was slow to deploy. It was even slower to change. And if you're a new bank, those things get in the way of business, right? You need to make decisions fast, change your proposition, tweak things as you learn about engagement with customers. And a core banking system that doesn't enable you to do that is in the way. And I'm pretty sure many of your listeners will feel some of that frustration. So I went, after we'd exited the bank, I went back to my co-founder and said, look, I really want to go and do something about core banking. I think everybody's doing it wrong. And this is what I think we should do. I know it's a pretty
big statement.
And so we created SaaScada, and SaaScada's journey begins. There's a few things that we do really, really differently from anybody else in the market. So let's talk about where we see challenges with core banking systems. So as a purchaser, the reason it's so slow to deploy and so slow to change, update, is because of its underlying architecture. And that's because core banking systems typically start on lending. Banks make money from lending money. So it's one of the most important things a bank has to do. And a core banking system starts with lending. And it often initial money comes in from capital markets and so on and so forth, and banks mature, and then they start wanting to take deposits from customers. And what happens is the code that is that lending module gets pulled out, moved over here, flipped upside down, and stuck back into the system, because now these accounts earn interest instead of charging interest, right?
Mm.
But your code base is now twice as big. This is a huge issue now. So now the expense of running one system's just doubled. And then what happens further down the line is that deposit code is taken and the bank wants to get into transactional. Take the deposit code, pull the interest bits off, stick it back in and go, there's your transactional accounts. And now the code base is 3 times the size. That stuff starts getting expensive and time consuming to change.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's
Yep.
about really intrinsically important to understand there is the functionality of the account and the account itself are very, very tightly locked together. And what can happen, and I'm sure some of your listeners will have experienced this, you can make a small change deep down in the system and it has this horrific cascade of things that it impacts deeper, further up inside the platform that no one guessed was going to happen. Didn't really understand all of those contingencies in there. It means when you do make changes, you're spending a lot of time doing regression testing to make sure your existing products aren't broken because you want to launch new ones. All of that takes a bank a year, 2 years, or longer to launch a product. That doesn't work, right? We're moving in a world that moves in much, much faster cycles than that. And so one of the big issues that we really wanted to solve is to bring agility to a bank. So a bank can start to understand what it wants to do, launch new products to market, and do it very, very quickly. We do that by breaking our products up into small little Lego blocks, little pieces of functionality. And then we allow our customers to bring those blocks together to build the types of accounts they want to offer to their customers. So it means once you're on our platform, we don't care whether you're launching current accounts, deposit accounts, loan accounts, mortgages, lending, it doesn't matter to us at all. All of that functionality is available to you on day one. So that as you learn what it is that your customers are looking for, you can launch new products in a matter of hours, minutes and hours, not months and years, in order to address the needs that they have. Critical change, critical thing that we wanted to address. The second piece,
So,
yeah, go ahead, Rick.
well, I was going to say, so sort of listening to that, I'm trying to remember a conversation I've had with some of your guys and some things I've read. I mean, you guys also took a very data-centric approach to
Yeah.
looking at how you build capability, and really started, if I'm remembering correctly, starting with sort of the data and working your way up a bit. Do I have that about right?
You 100% do. So here's another frustration we learned running a bank. Reporting is painful. It's slow, it's time consuming. There's a huge manual function in most banks that draws data from different databases, sews it together in Excel spreadsheets and delivers it to management. It's very hard to reconcile those reports against each other because they're all run at slightly different times. And that's frustrating, right? It's hard to run your bank if you cannot see what's happening now, you can't respond to now, you're always reacting several weeks later than you want to be. So how do we address that? Real-time data. We use an eventing system. So eventing is a type of architecture, effectively, without getting into deep software architecture kind of discussion, effectively something happens and there is a cascade of other events that happens as a result of something. In our case, it's a transaction. And we process all of our transactions as unstructured data. So we keep all the raw data we receive from card processors, payment systems, even customers sending down transactions into the platform. And we store it all unstructured. And then we have a separate system that takes the unstructured data and builds structures out of it. Now, those structures are used for our own APIs, but they're also used for customer management information, customer reg reporting, even some customers use it for rewards and incentive programs. The key concept to understand here is you can have an infinite number of those data views, structured data views, and you can build them for any purpose you like. The ridiculous example I give, no one's ever done this, is if the chief exec woke up one day and said, you know what, I want to know what the weather was like when any transaction happened in our bank. You can go into our eventing system and enrich transaction data with weather at time and location it happened. And the very next transaction that runs through the system will start populating that report. Even better, you can take that report, which is essentially a data template, and apply it to all the historic data you've ever done on SaaScada's platform. So your
Interesting.
ability to ask new questions of your data, and anyone who's done this knows that once you ask the first set of questions, there's another set of questions that come out of that. But your ability
Yeah.
to build those data sets and build new ones and build new ones again infinitely on the platform is an incredibly powerful
Mm.
tool. And where clients get that, you see incredible innovation. So they're
So,
using that real-time data to feed product intelligence back into their
mhm.
teams and then launching new products off of the back of that information. It's a really powerful tool.
So that's a pretty good segue to something else I wanted to kind of ask you. So, the reality is that, I mean, we obviously we're out of COVID and have been for a while,
Yeah.
but but that whole pandemic thing really did force many banks to revisit, um, what their digital properties look like and how they functioned. And, the old fashioned term for old guys like me were things like straight through processing and all that kind of jazz.
Yeah.
So how does this sort of modern day core, and I suspect that doesn't do Saskata justice, but how does this sort of modern day approach to core banking really better enable a bank's digital properties to not just provide what historically we've referred to as straight through processing, but really, those full views of the customer, all the things that we think about when we talk about giving a very robust digital experience to customers?
Yeah, I mean, straight through processing is a good example. And you know what? It's frightening how many banks still struggle to do this, right? I've often heard it being referred to as chair swiveling, where customer
Yeah.
service is kind of on one screen and then swivel their chair and start putting the data into another screen. So, look, the key to unlocking some straight-through processing is data and APIs. And I know that the industry's heard this forever, but the truth is, the more open and accessible that data is, the easier it is to take it and feed it straight into some other system. So
Mm.
typically, we will have data projections, right? These templates I was just talking about that are bespoke, especially for some other piece of software that needs an API that we can feed data straight into. Anytime we create one of these data projections, you get a full API to go with it. So you can access
Mm.
that data electronically if you need to. And connecting these systems together is what cuts out processing. So SCADA as a platform, we are entirely API driven. Whenever we're building new functionality, the first thing we sit down is design the API that our customers, tech teams, or implementers are going to need to use to make and access this functionality. Then we go backwards and build the data models behind that, and then build all the functionality in there as well. APIs, I know it's boring, I know it's not sexy, but it is absolutely the key to unlocking this. And we think of ourselves as a business as part of an ecosystem. Look, we know you guys very well because you're driven by some of the very same values that we are, right? Openness to
Yeah.
data, APIs, interaction. And we see that as an ecosystem with kind of KYC and reg reporting and digital front end and CRM and core banking and payments and cards. All of these things need to be able to talk to each other in order to offer a complete modern solution. And it's an
Yeah.
incredibly powerful way of working. The old full stack, historic, we call legacy core banking systems that sort of do each part of that, but not very well, at a painful way. And they're very difficult to get inside. They're very difficult to bring your own tools and processes to. You literally get the box and that's it. So we're very much a kind of ecosystem player. We do one small piece of a bank. It's an important piece, it's your products, it's all the ledgers, it's where the money is and payments, but it's a boring bit. We talk about it as being the boring bit of banking. We think the sexy, exciting stuff actually happens on top of our platform, right? This
Yeah.
is where user interface happens, customer services happens, all the things that makes banks different from other banks. We do the bit that makes banks the same. But critically, we allow them to do that quickly at an incredibly low cost point. This is not where you should be investing your money, banks. Up here, where the user interface and customer experience is, that's where you differentiate yourselves from other banks. Down here, money in, money out, all banks do that. That's not sexy and exciting.
So I've always sort of maintained that any customer facing set of technologies can only be as strong as and as capable as the back end systems are that ultimately feed them the information about the customer, right? And you're talking a bit about the ecosystem, so maybe I can ask you to kind of expand that a little bit. So if I'm the CIO of a bank and I lived in Disney World, I could just replace everything at will and put modern core technologies, modern card technologies, everything cloud based. I could just, the board would give me a checkbook and I just go to town, right? If I lived in Disney World, but none of us live in Disney World. So how is SaaScada working with some of your banking clients and who are really trying to, because it is a journey, right? And
Yeah.
frankly, there's probably not a destination. It truly is a journey.
Yeah.
But how are you working with some of your customers today to really help them move away from what we've kind of referred to over time as legacy systems into really what this modern approach to technology looks like?
Yeah, it's a great question. The we tend to look for very specific sets of things to kind of really understand whether a customer is a good fit for us. So the first one of those is going to be they've got some sort of challenge or issue with their core system, and they see an opportunity in market and want to put a product out that their current core system is going to be prohibitively expensive or very risky to do. That's a great opportunity for us. To give you an idea, running SaaScada's platform for a bank, for one of our typical customers, is no more expensive than a single consultant. That's roughly what it costs a month to run our core banking system.
Well, that's an
So
interesting statement.
yeah, it's really fascinating because what we end up there with is a bank that's got a new opportunity that they can see that they could execute on. Now that's interesting for us because they're risk on. We would talk about them as going, they're now in a, I'm going to try something new, which may or may not work. And I'm also open to trying new technology alongside that, right? Because I'm in a, I'm going to try something, right? I think there's an opportunity. I think we can execute here. So then we'll sit alongside an existing core. We'll get
Mm.
deployed because of our data views, right? We can feed data into all the existing reporting structures, reg systems, everything the bank uses. We can just emulate what their existing legacy core does. And so we can be fairly seamless and invisible sitting alongside that existing core.
Mm.
When you buy a SaaScada system, we'll give you the first 25,000 accounts included in the monthly fee. So you're launching a new product to market. It's probably going to take a year or two before you fill all those 25,000 accounts. In that year or two, what happens is the bank comes to us and says, this is actually really nice. Could we move some of our loans or deposits or other accounts onto the product? We're absolutely. Are you going to charge us any more? Not if you're staying within the 25,000 accounts. Help yourself. Go
Yeah.
ahead, move it whenever you want. Really powerful. And that ability, it de-risks that whole process of moving from a big tool legacy stack into a modern ecosystem. You get to try it while you're risk on as a bank, looking for a new opportunity in the market. Once you're trying that, you're getting the feel of it. You're starting to understand where the kind of where you can really leverage technology like this to make a difference. And then what happens is they slowly migrate across. It's a really, really powerful way of moving from old to new without giving the board a heart attack.
So I have a bit of an interesting question for you. I mean, okay, so my history is I've been around core banking for more years than I care to remember, right? I mean, I've been around this space a long time. And for many years, I've heard people say, your core banking system's really not going to give you a competitive advantage as a bank. But I'm not so sure I believe that. And I'm just a bit curious to see what your reaction is to that statement.
So I think there is some truth to it. However, um, if as a bank, it's going to take you a year to launch a new product on your legacy core banking system, the opportunity cost, not even mentioning whether the product is still relevant in a year's time, right? But the opportunity
Mm.
cost of not being able to execute quickly, try it out, find out, get feedback, and reiterate is going to be a killer for banks that don't make this leap. So I don't, it's not that intrinsically there's something special about core banking that gives you like a massive competitive advantage. It's how you use it. right? So the ability to see what your customer is doing in real time. The example I often give around this is banks will typically use their CRM to decide what they're going to market to what customers. But you don't really know what your customers are doing. If you want to understand what your customers are doing, the transactions reveal that information, and that data is in your core banking system. And if it's locked in there in such a way that you can't get to it, you're really kind of guessing what your customers want, not understanding. And that, I think, is
Yeah.
a major differentiator.
So, the reality is a tool is only as good as the craftsman using the tool, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Same. It's always been this way, though, huh?
Well, yeah, I would agree with that, right? Okay, so look, I'll tell you what. So we've talked a bit about core banking, and I think for those listening on the podcast, I would encourage you guys to have a bit of a chat with the SCADA guys. I just think their approach is very interesting, right? And I think it brings a lot of value to how you think about it. But Nelson, here's how I'd like to sort of end the podcast. So you're a bit of a proclaimed technologist, visionary, passionate about technology, I believe are the words that are used
Yeah, I am.
from time to time. So does that mean that you have this really great crystal ball relative to technology? And if I were to ask you, what do you think technology looks like relative to innovation and all that over the next year or two or three, how would you respond to that?
I wish it did give me a crystal ball. The truth is that so you know what, technology has to be well timed for a market. Right. When we started SCADA, nobody really got why what we were doing was incredibly important. Right. And it takes some time and traction. And actually, it's a fascinating thing about this particular market, financial services, due to the complexity of the underlying systems. It's not easy to flip from one thing to another and on to the next. But I see that changing. Right. I see
Yeah.
open banking evolving all over the world. And, here in Europe, we're fairly advanced, but I think there's still a long way to go. But what that gives us is the opportunity to standardize how we move and think about the data we hold. And if we can standardize the data that we hold, your ability to move it from provider X to provider Y is going to be so much easier and lower cost. And if you can do
Yeah.
that, suddenly you can start leveraging new opportunities in market that might not be available. So for me, it's a super exciting space. I am really, really enjoying the time I'm spending in financial services. Started with building a bank and now trying to solve some of the issues that we faced in doing that. I don't see any stop to that pace of change. In fact, if anything, it is getting quicker. Some of our UK clients, one of our UK clients is one of the fastest growing businesses in the UK. And it's directly because of their ability as a financial services, a bank, to innovate fast. And I see that happening elsewhere. I think the pace of change is going to increase. And the challenge for some of financial organizations is how on earth do we keep up?
Yeah, and I could not agree with that statement more for sure. Well, listen, this has been great. I think we may want to do this again because I've got a handful of other things I'd love to kind of take off on. Maybe not so much on core, but I do believe that digital has sort of forced banks to really think about how they do things, and I think what Sascata brings to the table is true value when it comes to being able to manage the boring part of the business. If I kind of take off on that term,
Yeah,
right? But the truth
absolutely.
is, it's not so boring. So anyway, I'm looking forward to watching you guys over the next many years for sure, and certainly glad that Tagit can be a partner with Sascata for sure. It's been great having you here.
Thanks, Rick. It's been super great talking to you. Love you guys. Looking forward to doing more and more stuff together over the coming years.